We are live, ma'am. You can start.
Hello and welcome. Good evening to all of you, and good morning to Professor Tom Goldstein, who's joining us live from Berkeley. And we're going to be talking about the US elections. And these are very odd times that we live in, and I think we can all agree about that. For a lot of us in India, there's been a huge conversation that's taken place about the US election, but there is also a distancing, shall we say, from the processes, and we don't quite understand where the US elections come from and the particular cards that Donald Trump is using at the moment. So let's start breaking those systems down and we'll start taking questions very quickly. But I'm going to start with just trying to get the basics in place. So, Tom, let me go to you first. Uh, this happened right through the last 4 years. The conversation started once again. When you look at the American elections, what does it mean to have the popular vote versus the winning vote?
The popular vote is the number of votes cast. Uh, each individual has one vote across the country, but the way things wind up, it's done state by state. So it is conceivable you can win the election by doing particularly well in certain states and not doing so well in the popular vote. I mean, that's what happened 4 years ago. I mean, despite what he said, Donald Trump did not win the popular vote, but he won the electoral college vote.
And since you brought that up, Tom, would you explain the Electoral College?
Well, I will not go into the electoral college are the number of votes that each state has essentially. And there is a group of electors, but ordinarily, in ordinary times, which these are not ordinary times, the electoral college votes the way the majority in each state voted. But that is now being challenged by Trump and Rudy Giuliani trying to get his own electors. I mean, it is a challenge that is almost 100% destined to fail, but they're trying.
Sukumar, if you could just contextualize for those of us who've grown up in India and are used to the Indian political system, the fundamental differences between the two.
Yeah, well, the best point of comparison is the Bihar election that was held just around the same time that the votes in the United States were being counted. And I think you had 150 million votes being cast in the United States in the presidential election, all over the country.
Just about.
Just over that, which is a record turnout for the United States, because there's a problem of voter indifference there. People don't worry too much about going there and standing in line and voting. And at the same time, I think roughly about 80, 90 million votes were cast in Bihar, in just one state. So it gives us a kind of comparison. And now those figures might seem inconsequential in relation to our epic scale of elections here. We have, in the last general election, I think we had 600 or 700 million voters casting their ballots. So the difference here is essentially that here we vote by constituency. Like I have a vote in my particular constituency where I live, and that vote counts roughly as much as anybody else's, because we try to create constituencies that are all equal in size, right? Except in the United States, because of the kind of history that they've had, there are some states, the smaller states, which insist that they don't want to be bullied by the larger states. So they insist on this electoral college system, which roughly equalizes their power. So those states get disproportionate power, and Mr. Trump has won a lot of his support in these smaller states rather than the big states on the West Coast and on the East Coast.
Right, since we've started talking about the states, Tom, red states, blue states, swing states. Tell us about them.
The red states tend to be conservative, blue states tend to be liberal, and within a range, and then the swing states can go either way. And the swing states are what candidates look for. I mean, for example, I'm staying in California now, which is by far the biggest state in the country. But I don't believe, and I may be wrong, but in the whole presidential campaign, neither candidate even stopped by California because they knew it was going to go Democratic. And so it was a waste of time to try to contest the state. And even though it's very, very big, the Republicans gave it up. And similarly in the Northeast, I mean, New York State, which is, I think now the fourth or fifth largest state, is solidly Democrat. So the Republicans don't bother, but it's the vast Middle West and rural America which decides elections.
The vast Middle West and the rural America, therefore, is where the focus of the canvassing takes place, and the process of that are the primaries, which is where who is going to actually stand for the presidential post takes place. What is the rationale behind the primaries, and how are they held?
The rationale behind the primaries, which we began almost a year ago, is a way of sorting out the candidates. I mean, that does not. It's like a preliminary round, and you can lose the primaries and still make it beyond. But it's a popularity contest, and what happens in the United States, various unlikely candidates emerge. I mean, for example, that's what happened with Barack Obama. In this particular primary, I mean, there were no Republican primaries. I mean, Trump ran again. In the Democrats, there were dozens of people competing, and Biden did not do particularly well. But so the surprise of Biden is that he made a comeback. He won in South Carolina as an underdog, and that gave him momentum. And within a week, the most formidable candidates dropped out. So it's a sorting process which works in different ways in different years. And I don't think the Biden strategy starting the year was, well, I'll lose everything until South Carolina and then make a bid. But that's how it happened.
Right. So before we talk about what's happening right now and what's happening with these specific elections, I think for context, it's important to discuss the 2016 elections and the rise of Trump. So Tom, will you take us over what watching that process was like and what your reading of it was as it was happening?
I don't think anyone believed that he was a serious candidate. Or maybe I'm projecting. I mean, I've known Trump since the early 1980s, and it was hard to take him seriously. He's full of ego and braggadocio. He had no government experience. He's a builder. Nothing wrong with being a builder, but he was not a public figure. And one of the things he did do, though, in the 1980s in New York City, which got him attention and gave him momentum, was that there was an ice skating rink in New York, a very quaint old ice skating rink that the city could not get working, essentially. And then Trump said, look, I'll do it, and I'll do it under a deadline. And in fact, he did. So it showed him as someone who could do things, and there you go. And he was, and at the time in the 80s, I mean, he would, it would be fanciful. People say, oh, you should run for president, you should run for mayor, or you should run for governor. And he never did. But one thing he did do, which sort of is hard to remember, he befriended reporters. Reporters liked him. He liked reporters. I still think he likes reporters, even though it's sometimes hard to see that through. And he liked reporters, and they continued to pay attention. And he, over the years, he was a builder and a real estate speculator who did very badly. and relied on government largesse and his father bailing him out. He wasn't particularly good at it. I mean, his major accomplishments, one of his still stands, building that ice skating rink. And that what he did, he was an expert in branding. Everything that he touched, he put his name on. And maybe there's something about the name Trump, which has a second meaning that people like, or it's simple, but it wasn't, it became a brand. And as I say, he put his name on everything he touched, even though he didn't own them because he didn't have any money. He rented out his name, and he got popular. At one point, he owned an airline. I mean,
Sell steaks at one point?
I'm sorry?
Didn't he sell steaks at one point?
Yes, steaks. Yes, and neckties. I mean, there's very few things he didn't sell. He's a hustler, a salesman, and he lived large. I mean, he lived on Fifth Avenue, which is one of the elegant streets in New York, in a multi-story penthouse with gold paint all over. I mean, some people didn't approve of his taste, but I mean, he was not shy about showing off money. And people said, here is this guy who was willing to say anything about anybody and live this dream life. And for most of his career, or much of his career, he was a Democrat. I mean, he didn't have, fixed political principles, but he ran and he was sort of this cartoonish figure. And then as time moved along, he saw an opening in 2016. He grabbed it and he saw something, he or people working for him saw something that was going on in the country that was not necessarily apparent to the established press. And what he saw was that America is not a very liberal place. And he played on that, and he continues to play on it. And despite everything, depending upon where you come from, and maybe you think he did great things in his first term or terrible things, but whatever he did, I mean, he lost the election. He didn't lose by that much. And there are lots of Americans who like him and who like what he stood for. And that's something you can't forget.
So, Kumar, looking from the outside, the world view on Trump when he was running in 2016.
I'm sorry, what is that?
Tom, of course, is speaking from the American perspective. From the outside, when Trump was running in 2016 for the rest of the world, for India, what were we seeing?
Yeah, of course. We always had a certain sense of respect for the American political system because it's a very solidly established system. And it just seemed that Mr. Trump didn't have any place in it. I mean, he was a kind of freakish, as Mr. Goldstein.
That's a very nice way of saying it.
he didn't have any place in it, and somehow he kind of clambered his way to power, and it was a shock, literally a shock, because till that the day when the election, the votes started being counted, everybody believed that Madam Clinton, Hillary Clinton, was going to win. But then this very surprising outcome turned up, and then that's when a lot of people started thinking about what's going on in the United States. Is there a serious dysfunction in this democracy, which we've all kind of respected over all these years? And one of the easily identifiable dysfunctions is the electoral college system. It's a legacy of 250 years, and Trump lost the election. He lost by 3 million votes, but won the electoral college, right? So it gave a lot of people a lot of food for thought. But even so, how did he flip those industrial states in the Midwest that put him over the top? So there's something there going on, which the United States, as the global superpower, which kind of determines lives and destinies all over the world, has to reckon with, because the rest of the world cannot remain hostage to this kind of toxic politics in the United States, right?
Yeah. Let me just add one thing that I've overlooked in Trump's rise to being the president. He was a television star, and his slogan for many years. He ran, he was on this show that many of you may know called The Apprentice, which basically he played this. It was well, I won't summarize it. I will betray my views of it, but it had this look. He would be mean to people, and at the end of it, he said, "You're fired." It became his mantra, and that seemed to work with a great percentage of disaffected Americans, and he rose to the top on that television show.
I think that um, Tom, you've put your finger on the really big question, which was the question in 2016. It's been the question right through the last 4 years, and in a sense, it's still the question: what is it about Trump and what Trump was promising? Because Trump wasn't actually promising very much in real terms, but he was promising a lot of things in sort of imaginary terms, which worked for the American public. And is that something that the American public is still hoping for? Or has the vote for Biden given an indication that American politics are moving towards a saner direction?
I'm not sure you could make that generalization yet. I mean, there, Trump has a hardcore 45%. He couldn't get more than that. I'm not sure that there's a hardcore 55% for any liberal. That's that land, that no man's land in the middle is what is being fought over. I mean, Joe Biden, who's been around for a long time, is not, in the scheme of things, is not all that liberal. He's going to have challenges when he becomes president because the liberals voted for him, not so much for him as voting against Trump, and he's going to have to satisfy them when he governs. I mean, basically, American has been ruled by centrists. Oh, Clinton was a centrist. Obama was a centrist. Biden, centrist, but it remains to be seen. And one of the things, if I can just add a point, is what's going on now, which is just, I mean, it's jaw dropping. What's going on now in the United States is what Trump is doing. I mean, he's got residual popularity. It seems that he's running for 2024, as remarkable as that may be. And he's begun running right now. Usually, you have a campaign that takes a year, then you give someone 3 years to govern. And, you view the world through a lens of government and good government, not through campaigning. And what Trump has done, or could well do, and we'll see in the next few months, is begun a perpetual campaign. And he will suck the oxygen out of governing, because Trump will get a lot of attention, much more attention than an opposing candidate usually gets in this country.
Well, I think that that's an excellent note to start taking questions from. We've got a few questions which have already come in on the chat, and I hope there'll be plenty more. But let's start with the first question here, which is coming from Saransh Jain. Saransh asks, what is your opinion on Trump? Which, Tom, you have kind of answered, but, will he concede? And if he doesn't, what happens?
I mean, I don't know whether he'll concede or not. But what happens is that he will be removed from the White House. I mean, he'll walk in the middle of the night, he'll leave. I mean, there is a history of candidates, not necessarily for president, not wanting to leave. and they go, and something happens to them, they view themselves as much more important than they actually are. But in the end, I don't know if he'll concede at all. Well, he doesn't have to.
What's the message that gets sent out? Doesn't
That
concede.
people, well, I mean, I view it one way, you view it another, and Sukumar a third, but they're saying this guy is nuts. But his constituencies might well view it as saying, yeah, here it is. Here's a guy standing up for what he believes is right. He really did win. There really was a fix, and he should, good for him to keep plugging away. Again, I don't view it that way, but I think there are enough people out there who do, which brings me to another point, if I could just raise. There aren't enough reporters in this country, the United States, who are conservative, who really appreciate Trump, understand Trump. I mean, that was a complaint after 2016. So news organizations went and tried to hire conservatives. It was a complaint in the 1970s when Nixon was president. We need more conservatives to understand this country and to understand presidential politics. It hasn't happened. And therefore we view what's going on with Trump through our perspective, which happen to think is the right perspective, but we need more perspectives.
Of course, that's the question that everyone's asking right now, Sukumar, don't you think? Like, across the world, we're looking at it being like, will the man concede? Will he be marched out of the White House? What is going to happen in January? And of course he will leave, but what will he leave behind in the next 3 months is the really big question the rest of the world is asking as well, right?
Yeah, well, I think he has begun advanced preparations for delegitimizing the Joseph Biden presidency, and he will play upon this theme right through the next 4 years, and perhaps run again. I mean, I personally think it would be reckless of him to do that, but he would probably put up a proxy, maybe somebody from his family, because there's nobody else whom he trusts, and the only person who he trusts within his family is probably his daughter Ivanka. So anything is possible, but my sense has been that the U.S. electorate has been discerning enough to sift between the imposter and the real guy. I mean, they've disappointed us in the past on occasions. Notably, I would say, I don't know what Tom would say about this, but since I have been a political hack for a long time, I think they disappointed us in 1980 when they elected Ronald Reagan, the kind of the cowboy actor. But what Trump has essentially shown us is that the institutions are vulnerable. Like that one man sitting in that very powerful office can damage institutions so badly that it's going to be difficult for the successor to pick up the pieces and repair the whole system. So yeah, well, it does nobody any good to see this great superpower crumbling into any kind of chaos or anarchy. But I certainly hope that Mr. Biden manages to put the pieces together back.
So
Actually, sure, Tom.
Oh, I just was going to make. You mentioned Reagan, the cowboy. I mean, he was a couple of other things too. I mean, he came across as a nice guy, even though it's not clear he was. But he got his start. I mean, he was not much of an actor. He got his start on television as well. He was a pitchman. He sold products, which is sort of an interesting thread that goes from Reagan through Trump. I mean, making success on television translating to a larger world.
I would say, Tom, that Reagan at least went through the Republican Party step by step. He did.
Yes,
He
and he was
made all the
yes,
right moves.
and he was governor of
And is governor of
California.
California, whereas Donald Trump is a maverick in the truest sense of the word.
That's true.
We've got a couple of questions which I'm going to club together on Joe Biden. We've got a question from Palak, who is asking if you think Joe Biden will be as competent as Obama or previous U.S. presidents. And you have Amrit, who is asking what your views are on fossil fuel money influencing Biden on climate policy. So to broaden that question out, the questions basically are, on one hand, how competent do you think Joe Biden will be as president? And two, what do you think Joe Biden's policies are going to look like?
Well, this is for me.
Well, first you.
Okay. I mean, Joe Biden is an experienced person, which was being used against him in the final weeks of the campaign. Look, he's been around for 47 years. I mean, he was 29 when he was elected. I mean, he has he has a very comfortable way with people. He's empathetic, sort of the anti-Trump, which is very useful. Is he a genius? I don't think anyone would accuse him of being a genius. But is he an organized, competent guy? Probably. Will he get decent people to work for him? Probably. Will he calm things down? I would guess so. I mean, is he respected around the world? Generally speaking, I think he had a pretty good reputation. And I think there are people around, world leaders, some of whom adored Trump, but many of whom were just exhausted by him and couldn't wait for him to exit the stage. So that will give Biden an advantage. And I think, Biden is in general will do things that help people. I mean, he's given, with this terrible pandemic going on, it seems that he's given an issue that is soluble at this point with vaccines, and he will devote his time to solving it. It is remarkable that Trump, give credit where credit is due, I guess. He put money for the vaccine makers, which is an easy step to do, but he did it. But then he seems to have paid no attention. And how that can happen is just remarkable. Mm-hmm. But Biden will focus on that and just cleaning up after the pandemic is going to spend. You'll have to spend a lot of time. I live in a little bubble here in Berkeley, which Kajori has visited. The number of stores and restaurants that are closed for good now each day. I get out and see that, oh my gosh, no, the neighborhood drugstore is closed. Just getting life back to normal in the United States is going to be a major challenge, and that's what Biden will have to do. And the stock market in the United States is taken by many as a proxy of economic health, and it's quite misleading. The stock market's doing great during this pandemic, but people are not doing great, and the people and the stock market, and it's a sliver of the world. The United States is in serious trouble. The world has stopped here.
So, of course, that's as far as Biden's internal domestic policies are concerned. Sukumar, what is the rest of the world looking at Biden to do?
Well, the position carries a certain sense of authority and commands a lot of respect. There are people who squandered that respect in the past, who alienated essential allies of the United States, and but somehow they managed to come out on top despite all this. But I think Mr. Trump has done pretty serious damage. He's caused a lot of damage with most of the European allies, and also with many of the East Asian allies. Because the whole kind of fracas with China is going to have wider
we have a question on that. We're going to talk about that in more detail.
So Obama tried to be kind of conciliatory with China because he knew that this trans-Pacific partnership is very important for the United States. But now Trump has gone into this confrontational kind of mode with China, and people are being forced to take sides, and nobody knows. Recently they signed this regional comprehensive economic partnership agreement. 29 countries in East Asia which have joined together, and the United States have stayed out of it. They led that initiative, then under Trump they left it. So this is the problem that the United States is going to face, because they have repeatedly gone into these international agreements and then pulled out of them. The Paris Accord on climate change, they signed it.
Sukumar, let's talk specifically about that one. Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a question on that which I think we should take up in more detail. So we've got Amrit here asking that there are very strong fossil fuel lobbies in the United States, which did drive Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Accords and his entire position on climate change. Do you see Joe Biden doing anything radically different? Tom?
He will be anti-Trump. I mean, he will bring, I have no special expertise in this area. He will bring things back to before Trump arrived. And I'm not sure how much he'll carry it forward, but it's certainly status quo ante.
Sukumar?
Right. He kind of fudged that question during the campaign. I believe it was asked during a campaign debate, and he kind of waffled a bit. He was not sure what to say because there's a very strong fossil fuel lobby there from the United States, and
particularly Pennsylvania.
A large number of livelihoods depend upon fossil fuel extraction and refining and everything. So he kind of, he's trying to play to both sides. Now, there is a very strong lobby within his Democratic Party, which is arguing this case for a Green New Deal, which Mr. Trump tried to portray as some kind of radical disruptionist, anarchist, socialist. He used every possible word to mischaracterize it. But there's a very strong lobby within the Democratic Party, and they have substantial strength within the U.S. Congress. And they're going to argue that this case, that going down this pathway is pretty futile, that you got to find ways of relocating those workers who are dependent upon fossil fuel exploitation into other sectors. And and as a technologically advanced country with great innovative skills and resources, we should be able to make that transition. Now, Tom made this point about the stock market. Whether the stock market will allow the transition or not is another question, because the stock market has become too big a determinant of United States economic fortunes. That is part of the problem that the US today faces.
Right. So we have a question from Achal Kapoor, who says, if the world is seeing the US within itself as being profoundly divided in its political positions, will it be able to remain a superpower for a significant period? Tom?
I do not have a crystal ball. I think the divisiveness in the U.S. is not helpful, and usually, things they rally to the middle or slightly to the edges of the middle, and we'll see what happens. But I think the jury is certainly still out, because again, I think people in the United States were surprised, and I think people in the world were surprised by the hardcore right that exists in this country, that I don't think was as visible
You know,
uh,
I'm going to
before.
since it hasn't come up in the questions here, I really did expect it to. Tom, I have to ask you your opinions on QAnon.
I mean, it's my opinion is it's bonkers, and I just don't, you know, and I don't have a framework to understand how people can take it seriously. No.
Okay. We've got a couple of questions here about foreign policy, so let's take those up. We have Aditya Agrawal asking, what, in your opinion, will be the US's stand on China under the Biden presidency? Tom?
I think it will, you know, again, there are lots of moving parts there, but I think it will return to a Obama view of China.
Okay, all right.
That's,
Sukumar?
Yeah, I think I agree entirely because there's a pattern in the recent past. Bill Clinton recognized the rising power of China, so he had this kind of outreach program. He used to go to, I think he's paid a few visits to China. He had town hall meetings and so on, at which he addressed university students. He did the same in Egypt also, and Obama has done the same thing in China, in Egypt, and in India, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obama came here and spoke.
Yeah.
So they have a recognition that there are these other countries that are rising and that the US should not stand in the way. And the best way of sustaining US global power is to kind of arrive at some kind of accommodation, some kind of harmony with these rising powers, India, China, Egypt, Turkey, there are a number of them. Trump has got into this kind of confrontational mode, which nobody can understand because it's very quirky. It's very eccentric. If you look at the previous Republican president, Mr. Bush, he had a kind of system about. He also got into a confrontational mode with China, but there was a system there. There was a system. With Trump, there's no such system. He's just doing everything on a whim. So that's dangerous. When you have a superpower with a president who's so prone to mood swings,
right?
You have to be really worried.
So at least Biden doesn't seem particularly prone to mood swings, and so that alone is a reassurance. But of course, the question that this automatically leads to, and it's a question that has been asked here by both Shravani and Diptanshu, is depending, of course, on how President Joe Biden decides to deal with the China issue, given how sensitive our relationship with China is at the moment, and of course the sort of very strange camaraderie that existed between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What is going to be Biden's view towards India? Tom?
Biden's view towards India is he's going to delegate it to Kamala Harris, saying, "What should I do? I want to have good relations with India. Tell me what, and you're going to take the lead in formulating a policy. And I can't tell you what that, but it will be a friendly policy. It will be supportive of India, less supportive of Modi."
Sukumar?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pragmatic point of view. I think we were a little unrealistic in our expectation that Trump's kind of quirky, whimsical, eccentric policy, which swings one way and then the other, would bring us any benefit. I think we took all the wrong cues from Trump's eccentricities. We thought that because of his anti-Islam, anti-China, anti-whatever kind of perspective, he'll become pro-India. But that's not how things work. The United States is a large, complex country with interests and with with irons in the fire all over the world. I mean, they can never have an accommodation with India that alienates Pakistan, for instance, because Pakistan is very important for their Afghanistan project, and and so on and so forth. So we should not get into this expectation, these very, very unrealistic expectations of salvation from the United States.
Mhm.
We should resolve those problems ourselves. We have problems, multiple problems of our own, which we can
Right.
resolve.
Tom, now that you've mentioned her, and we've got a couple of questions about her as well from Shravani, your thoughts on Kamala Harris as vice president, of course, but also as the vice presidential choice?
In retrospect, it was brilliant.
Did you not think so at the time?
I wasn't sure. Wasn't sure. I mean, she her back. She has an interesting resume. She's a prosecutor, and it's a certain mindset that prosecutors bring. Many prosecutors bring. I'm not sure she does. It's sort of offset a bit from coming from California. Prosecutors in California are different from prosecutors elsewhere, at least contemporary prosecutors in California. But she was a terrific candidate. She turned out to be a terrific candidate. I mean, she deferred when necessary. She was independent when necessary. She was supportive when necessary. Very articulate. She held her own in debates. I mean, I think she gives no impression that she has tension with the candidate or wants his job. I think she understands that if she waits patiently, her time might well come.
So just to take this second part of Shravani's question here, which is, do you think that having a woman of color in this kind of position of power will change the extreme discrimination that certain groups face in the United States?
It'll help change it. I mean, we shouldn't forget that for 8 years, ending 4 years ago, we had an African-American president. And it did change some things, and there's still many things left to change. It is almost unnoticed now that there is a woman, as well as someone with a multicultural background. I mean, the United States has changed a lot, but that becomes second nature.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's certain things that are unsaid that are built in the American psyche. I mean, Biden is not a young man, and he has had health issues, and this job. I mean, and it's all well and good for Trump to make fun of him. He is not an elegant speaker, even though he can be a very powerful orator when he's having a very good day. But we don't know what's going to happen to Biden. It's certainly a different perspective than, say, when Obama became president. I mean, everyone expected him to remain healthy and energetic. I mean, Biden will be 82 at the end of his term. That changes things. It is assumed in the United States that, and if you look at recent presidents, there is basis for assumption that you're going to serve 2 terms. It's not likely that Biden's going to serve a second term. He could, but I mean, he'll be 82 at the time of the next election. Mm-hmm. And of course, if Trump goes against him, Trump will be 78. It's sort of a gerontocracy, but that's getting ahead. But but Biden is a one. We really have to think about it as being a one-term president. And I'm pretty sure that that's what Kamala Harris thinks too. She's not going to say it, but and she's going to act that way. I mean, the prize will be hers, for the taking in 4 years. And again, but no one's going to say it. I mean, it'll begin to get mentioned, but she's going to behave in that way.
I mean, I hate to say this, but Is that a realistic possibility, Tom? Because you've got Hillary Clinton, who stood in 2016, and a lot of the commentary about Hillary Clinton's loss was people saying, well, America just wasn't ready to vote for a woman.
Yeah.
Would America be ready to vote for a multicultural, biracial woman?
After 4 years, my guess is yes. And Hillary Clinton is a special case because the American ambivalence towards her husband, they loved him and that they weren't quite sure. And she was running as an extension of her husband, and people just didn't like her. There was an irreducible minimum. I mean, you see none of that with Kamala Harris or nothing yet. I mean, she comes across, some people gets on their nerves. She laughs a lot. I mean, and that's nice. I mean, she adds sunshine to a room in a way in which Hillary Clinton was dour. I mean, these are, so I think the Democrats are ready. I don't think they were ready for her to win the nomination this year, but she will have had plenty of experience, and I think she's done herself a world of good in the campaign.
Right. There is a question here which I want both of you to talk about. Voter suppression. The idea of voter suppression in America. Is Biden how real, how bad is the problem? How is Biden going to tackle it?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know how real it is. I mean, it certainly exists, probably nowhere nearly to the extent that it once did. And I'm not sure that, I don't know what Biden can do. I think he will have top aides look at it. I mean, his political people, but I'm not sure that that's something that he's going to devote a lot of time to.
So, Kumar, what was your take on the whole sort of voter suppression discussion?
No, I've been having conversations with a lot of friends, my college friends, who are all settled in the US. And they believe that it's a problem. And they believe that, for instance, I posed them the question that there are states like Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, which have like 30% Black population. And they keep electing fairly right-wing and almost racist, closet Klansmen, as I call them, to the Senate, in statewide elections. Now, one state that has seemingly made a difference is Georgia, because Georgia has, for the first time since 1976, when native son Jimmy Carter was candidate, voted Democratic. And that, I believe, essentially is because of this young woman, Stacey Abrams, who contested
remarkable
years back and lost by 50,000 votes because her opposition candidate was the man writing the rules. He was Secretary of State for Georgia, who was writing the rules for the election, managed to purge hundreds of thousands of Black voters from the voter rolls. And so she lost. And she kind of took it upon herself to mobilize and to, get people enfranchised, to get them back on the voter rolls. And it shows the results. Today Georgia has recertified that Mr. Biden has won the state.
And we'll see what happens in the runoffs. That will be
in January.
Georgia's mature.
So it is a problem, and the ultimate referee here is the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, and there the Republicans have got this super majority now, 6-3.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So there are a lot of problems going forward, but I'm sure that any effort to suppress and to deny the vote to minorities and to the Blacks will be resisted, will be talked about, and not just among Blacks, but there's a very large liberal constituency in the United States which is committed to that ideal of equal rights.
Tom, we have a question here. What is your opinion on Bernie Sanders? And as an extension, what is your opinion on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? So basically, what is your opinion on the left
the
in
left.
America?
I think they play a vital role, and they're going to, they will have their challenges, and I mean, and they behaved in an honorable, exemplary way during the election. She in particular, and Bernie Sanders. I mean, he is sufficiently out there. I mean, he wants to be Secretary of Labor. He really wants to be, and if he doesn't get it, there's going to be a problem. And it's been a
Could you
long
explain
time.
that? Could you explain that statement a little further, Tom?
Well, I mean, because he is owed, and his constituents think that he is owed. And if this is the position he wants, he should get, and he should do things with it. It's been a long time within my memory that the Secretary of Labor has been a job that people have actively fought for. But he's instead of being a member of the Senate, but again, he wants another challenge. He thinks his politics can be better served that way. So I think there's going to be a real issue if he doesn't get it and doesn't get some comparable position.
This term feeds right into the next question, which is, what is Biden going to do as far as issues like Social Security is concerned? Trump wasn't exactly the most generous towards sort of low-income communities, children, the pensioners, anyone really.
What's he going to do? I mean, I'm sure he'll try to be a good Democrat. I'm just not sure how much money is sloshing around anymore. I mean, COVID-19 has devastated this country, and the effects of which will only begin to be felt when he takes office. I mean, once people get healthy, he's got real issues.
Sukumar, Trump had a very anti-immigration stance. That's something obviously that Biden is going to have to soften whenever immigration once again becomes possible. What's the balancing act? What is the balancing act, in your opinion, going to have to look like there?
Well, I think comprehensive immigration reform has been much talked about and always run into a kind of deadlock in US Congress. But some of the kind of, I hate to use that term, but inhumane kind of policies that Trump implemented would obviously be reversed. The caging of children, the denial of, the DACA, the children who come in as, as toddlers, and they have no place to go because this is the only place that they've been in their entire lives. So you can't deny them that citizenship, and certainly not the largest democracy. I mean, the most prosperous democracy, which aspires to be a global leader. So certainly they shouldn't be doing that sort of thing. They don't realize. Mr. Trump doesn't realize what a horrendous signal that sends out to the rest of the world. So as for the rest of it, I frankly think, as Tom was just saying, that the United States has been in deficit for so long, and it's kind of, it's now got into this hole where it has to write out checks to China and so on and so forth. And now they've just got this $3 trillion whatever. I don't know how many, because these numbers are beyond my comprehension. Bailout
many
plan.
Zeros.
Yeah, bailout plan for the pandemic, and that means creating more money and expecting the rest of the world to respect that promise to pay. And it's a relationship with the rest of the world that they have to be very careful about sustaining. You can't sustain it on the basis of this kind of aggressive approach that Mr. Trump has been adopting. You have to build trust. You have to rebuild that trust. Now, the big difference between George Bush and Obama was that Bush squandered the trust, by this war in Iraq and so on and so forth. And then he invited that disaster of the 2008 financial meltdown.
Right.
Obama tried to pick up those pieces. He tried to kind of redress those, but he also realized that essential to that is rebuilding trust with the rest of the world. Which is why he was a much more kind of conciliatory and moderate president in terms of his international relationships.
Sure.
Including with China. Right.
Well, there are a couple of questions that, one of the questions has just come in, interestingly enough, just as I was about to ask it. Tom, Obamacare, that Trump did everything that he could in his powers to dismantle. Joe Biden, as the inheritor of Obama's mantle, is he going to bring it back?
Yes, but slowly, gradually. Again, I mean, he's going to have to start. I mean, very soon, once it becomes clear that the corner actually has been turned on COVID, he's going to have some global reckoning on what can be done. And he's going to have to come up with a different from a campaign platform. I mean, it's going to be, facing reality. So I can't predict the specifics of that, but it's going to be a difficult.
So you think nationalizing healthcare is definitely on the agenda in the next 4 years?
I think it's on the agenda.
Right. Okay, we're almost out of time. I'm going to ask one final question because actually this is something I'm very curious about. Over the last 4 years, we have seen public right-wing speech bordering on and sometimes spilling over into hate speech which is straight up white supremacist, is fascist, is Nazi. Being promoted in various parts of the United States of America and being backed by Donald Trump on various public platforms. Is that now a threat that is here to stay, or will the next 4 years be working towards fixing it and making it go away?
I think it's probably always, been around in some fashion below the surface. Trump gave it permission to bubble up. As I said earlier, there's a hardcore 40% in this country that are very different from the US ideals that I have learned to live with and appreciate. So, is it going to go away? Probably not. I mean, there is unfairness in this country. There are people who do not get to enjoy the fruits of prosperity, and they're subject, to demagoguery. Will find a welcome audience. It will be less open with Biden, but it won't go away.
Well, thank you so much, Dean Goldstein. Professor Muralidharan, I think it went off incredibly well. Some of the questions were absolutely fantastic. Actually, all of the questions were absolutely fantastic. And I think your answers, while measured, have given us a lot to think about. Both of you were very careful about how you framed what you said. I think we have an interesting few years ahead in America and the rest of the world as we see how the Biden presidency, when the Biden presidency gets going, what happens with it, and how Donald Trump is going to spend the next couple of years. I think it's going to be interesting to watch that as well. Thank you. Thank you once again, and thank you so much, students, for joining us and asking some incredible questions.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kajori. Thank you, Tom. And thank you to the students.